Remember the time I made a video advising how to make time for photography and then didn't have the time to make a photography YouTube video for a few months? Probably not, because none of you watched that video anyway. I've been looking at some of the small Fujifilm wide-angle primes so that I can fit Helen's ginormous arse in the frame. I like the f2 primes because I care more about how small and compact they are than impressing people on the internet with how small my f-stop number is. I've never been that much of a prime shooter really, so I wanted to see if any of these lenses would convince me to keep them in my kit. The lenses I've plumped for are the 18mm f2, the 23 f2, and the 35 f2. As I mentioned before, they're all lightweight, coming in at under 200 grams each. That's half a pound in old money. They're of a similar size too, with the 23mm being the lengthiest, followed by the slightly shorter 35mm, and then the Pancake 18. So it's negligible in weight and size, which means choosing between them basically boils down to performance, or your personal preference in focal length. Or my personal preference, this is my decision, stop trying to take over all the time. The only way to work out which lenses we like is to look at what's popular on social media and then see if we can fit in there. Or we can actually pair these lenses with an X-Pro 2 for instance and make up our own mind. So let's see if we can make it further than the front door, tackle our agoraphobia, and head out into the mountains to play with our new toys. The 18mm is the obvious place to start here, and obviously you're going to fit more into the frame with the widest focal length. I tried to use this lens at around the 5.6 mark because that's apparently where the optimal performance is for it, and I personally don't have any complaints with image quality on these very wide shots, although it's worth noting that I'm more of a women's changing room peeper than a pixel peeper. The 23mm gets us in slightly closer, and I'm fully expecting this to be my favourite amongst the three as we start off. I think I'm going to enjoy the in-between focal length that might be able to do a little bit of both from either lenses. Just snuck in a quick shot of Helen in the field there with her wide donkey arse. But it's a great start for the very popular 35mm here as well. As we can see, it handles the contrast in this scene beautifully, with the dark foreground and harsh light cutting across the back. Notice how the light fades off into the misty background too. Really nicely rendered here. Anyway, we're best putting these lenses through their paces a bit further afield, so let's head out into those mountains. It's difficult to talk about these lenses without it turning into a video that's more about different focal lengths as opposed to the lenses themselves, but this is a decent example of how the two widest lenses can either add or hide contrast from the scene depending on what you're going for. Luckily I was going for a god-awful composition, so mission accomplished. And whilst the other two can better show space and environment, the 35mm can clearly do that too. But the fact that it can get you closer, I found to be something that I reach out for more often than I thought I would. When you're limited with a prime's focal length, sometimes it's a case of shooting different compositions to complement said focal length. So whilst the 23mm feels further away, and we can't show the house here as much as we might like, you can instead introduce a sense of scale, in this case making the frame vertical and showing the house being dwarfed by the fell. Helen farted here and then decided to leave me with it, which is romantic. As you would expect, I'm shooting all these lenses at decently high apertures with these shots, between f4 and f8 for the most part, so they're all performing pretty much the same optically, although I did want to see what the background separation is like on these slightly faster lenses. I'm about 6 foot away with the 35 here, and wide open we've luckily got modern cameras that can shoot at 1/5000th of a second in this case. Of course the closer you get the better the bokeh will be, but even here with a wider lens we can see a small amount of background blur. Which led me to try a similar shot here with the 18mm. I didn't expect to see any bokeh here at all, but there is the tiniest fraction of some. And to my surprise you can actually get really close up with these lenses. 7 inches away with the 18mm actually. Which is easy for me to remember because, well, it's not important. But surprisingly, we are seeing some okay separation here, which I never expected from this wide of an angle with the APS-C sensor. And considering it's wide open, the text is decently sharp as well. I was impressed by the pancake here, although it is a niche performance test that I'm not sure many will get much use out of like this in real life. Another example of how close you can get is how shallow the depth of field becomes with this flower. Notice how you can see the right hand side with the water droplets perfectly sharp, but the left hand side is soft. The bokeh isn't very nice though, unfortunately, it's really messy. Again, this is a really niche use for this lens though. The 23's bokeh is more pleasant and I'm happy with it for an f2 on an APS-C sensor. Although it's not exactly going to perform like an 80mm portrait or a 1.4 lens. Razor thin focal plane here too, and I barely get these tiny flowers in focus. And I just straight up forgot to test close-up bokeh with the 35mm, so here's an image of a spoon. Tried it with the 35 like an absolute muppet. Into 23 on this one, mate.
Are you supposed to know what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. Let's say I do. Let's just pretend.
Yeah.
YouTube, everyone's pretending.
Oh, yeah.
Don't ever think that everyone's an expert and you're not. Everyone's just winging it. Except me. I know what I'm doing. Do you want to do your impression of people that you walk past in the Lake District?
Me, yeah. One of the nicest places in the world.
Yeah. Let's be miserable and walk around with a mopey face. Like in the 35.
Me too.
Haven't made my mind up yet, but
I haven't got a clue what you're talking about, but yeah. See you again.
after looking through all the shots on this trip, I did find myself shooting with the 35 the most often. I think this is a good way to decide which lenses you should and shouldn't keep. I mean, if you're going for the same ones over and over again whilst the other lenses you have gather dust, then it's probably best to just free up the funds for something you'll actually use, like pile cream, or cinema tickets for one. That genuinely wasn't worth stopping for.
So I've gone to all this effort for absolutely nothing. Thanks.
I'd rather have killed myself than take that shot.
Jesus. Are you actually doing anything or just standing there? Alright, that's your channel. I was going to say you have to furrow your brow and do that manly catalogue pose look. Oh, that's it, yeah. Oh, work it, baby, work it. Oh God, I can't believe I just said that. That's gross. No, now that's just verging on the creepy again. Right, okay, I'm going to turn it off now.
Obviously I'd like to have used a slower shutter speed to get some blur on this guy, but by the time he'd hurtled past me at 30 miles an hour, I'd already pissed my pants and he was already on the horizon. After being violently surrounded, we paid the sheep toll and could head back, at which point it was time to test out the weather sealing on not only the X-Pro 2, but on the lenses themselves. Started raining. Luckily these are weather sealed.
I'm Christ for that.
So we'll scuba dive test them after. And if they break even a little bit, I'll not be happy. Still here. I tried out both the 35 and the 23mm in this downpour and they both performed excellently, no issues with them whatsoever. Although it is noteworthy that the 18mm pancake lens is not weather sealed, and while I did use it for a couple of little shots here and there that aren't really worth showing you, it really wasn't worth risking using it in the rain, so that's one strike against the pancake. There are some other benefits to be had being out during monsoon season as well. We discovered a new sport, 4-wheel drive off-road baby trucking. Hope there's a roll cage on that thing, and that the baby has a neck brace. Hardly use the 18. Risky changing your lens in the rain, but a bit of a maverick, a bit of a badass. Call them Billy Big Bollocks, don't they?
Do they? Walk down the local pub.
Yeah. Billy Big Bollocks always changes his lenses in the rain, like an absolute badass.
That's why I'm attracted to you.
Not. As irresistible as changing the lenses in the rain makes you to the ladies, it's risky, and I did end up with a couple of water droplets on the sensor regardless of being ridiculously cautious. It was soon wicked away with the corner of a tissue, but this is the downside of primes that people don't tend to discuss. It's great when stuff is weather sealed, and I didn't have a single issue with any of my weather seal gear during the trip, but if you often change lenses with primes, then it doesn't matter how weather sealed your stuff is, you're still opening up the sensor to the elements. Break that, and you break your camera. Like I said before, I did just end up plumping for the 35 most of the time while I was using this kit. The 18 had really narrow cases for me, even in glorious landscapes such as the Lake District, and if I'm honest, I kind of forced myself to get shots with it just for this video. The 23 is the one that I thought I would reach out to the most, as it's a perfect marrying of the two, and while it's a good in-between, I think I'd rather just get close into what I'm shooting, as opposed to showing more of the surrounding scenes around the subject I'm shooting. Autofocus was fine because I just use single point autofocus anyway, not exactly pushing these things. And optically they're very similar lenses as far as I can tell, bearing in mind that I'm not a pixel peeping dork. I'm sure there's experts on here that can tell you about the exact apertures to shoot at and all that, but for me it just ends up coming down to which focal length I prefer, which I really didn't want to be the conclusion of this video. I thought it might come down to some kind of performance issue, but they did just all end up performing the same for me. It's not a flashy or fun conclusion, but I has to says it as I sees it. Otherwise you might lose all faith in me being a mega cool pro level photo man on YouTube, and imagine how much worse your life would be if you lost that kind of faith.